Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. Now, the head of the bomb disposal unit in Somalia's semi-autonomous Puntland region has been killed in an explosion. Colonel Osman Abshir Omar was defusing a roadside bomb when it detonated. It happened on a road that connects the Puntland city of Bosaso with Gilgala Hills, an area controlled by Al-Shabaab. The terror group has claimed responsibility for the blast, saying they targeted the colonel. Militant attacks in Puntland are rare compared to the rest of Somalia. Meanwhile, the U.S. has carried out an airstrike in southern Somalia. An official told VOA's Somali service, and an unmanned drone struck a vehicle loaded with explosives heading for Mogadishu, intending to harm civilians. The U.S. Africa Command has confirmed reports of the strike, saying no civilians were killed. Moving to the Democratic Republic of Congo, where a memorial service has been held in the town of Beni for the Tanzanian UN peacekeepers killed at their base on Friday. Suspected Ugandan rebels killed 14 peacekeepers and wounded more than 50 others in what UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called the worst attack on the organization in recent history. UN officials suspect militants from the Allied Democratic Forces, or ADF, staged the assault on a base in North Kivu's Beni territory. The ADF is an Islamist rebel group that has been active in the area. The slain Blue Helmets were part of MONUSCO, the UN's largest peacekeeping mission in the world. Amnesty International has released a damning report accusing European governments of being complicit in human rights abuses in Libya. The report, titled Libya's Dark Web of Collusion, says Europe is aiding and abating the torture and abuse of tens of thousands of refugees and migrants detained in appalling conditions. The report comes in the wake of global outrage over the reported sale of migrants in Libya. Amnesty points to a sophisticated system of abuse and exploitation of refugees and migrants by the Libyan Coast Guard, detention authorities and smugglers to prevent people from crossing the Mediterranean. It says European governments have not only been fully aware of abuses, they have been actively supporting Libyan authorities in stopping sea crossings and containing people in Libya. Amnesty says that makes those governments via the Euro be complicit in all these abuses. Now, for a closer look at Amnesty's report, John Dal Hussein, the director of the Amnesty International Europe, joins me live via Skype from London. Good evening, John.
Good evening. Good evening.
Now, the Libyan authorities had been asking for help from the European nations. They got the help. What is the problem there? They will say they're trying to do their best.
Well, it's really what is motivating European authorities with their cooperation with Libyan authorities, and what are they insisting on from their Libyan counterparts. What we're documenting in this report we published today is a series of abuses by the Libyan Coast Guard, by Libyan officials responsible for the detention of migrants, and how those two authorities are acting together, colluding with smugglers. Our contention is that European governments, Italy in particular, knows this very well, but is nonetheless cooperating with, supporting in terms of equipment, funding, training, those authorities. And it's doing this with blithe regard for the fact that this cooperation is leaving people trapped in Libya and exposed to horrific abuses.
Now, the Europeans are really grappling with massive numbers of people trying to cross. What would be the best way for them to stem this tide, but at the same time ensure that people's rights are respected and there are no abuses or torture?
I mean, I think first it's important to challenge the assumption that there are huge numbers of people flooding across unguarded European borders, and it's not really the case at all. We're talking about, so far this year, 100,000. Last year across the central Mediterranean it was 160,000. So if one moves on from a year in which there were a very large number of Syrian refugees, in fact we're returning to a situation much more stable flows, and ultimately probably very manageable ones, and I think it's important to stress that. However, insofar as any system obviously struggles with unregulated flows, with irregular migration that can be both a security and a problem for getting political buy-in from a broader European demos. There are real challenges, but the solution to that can't be by cutting off flows mid-route through a series of dodgy deals with abusive and exploitative authorities. It needs to be by looking in a much more sophisticated way at the incentives and disincentives that people trying to reach Europe face. So offering them more safe and legal routes to arrive, safe and legal routes for return.
Yeah, this could be more like a long-term approach here, but in the short term, while those people are still stuck in Libya, Libya is what it is today. It's a fairly broken system. How can the European nations handle the problem?
I think there are a number of very clear, straightforward, fairly concrete things that it should be doing. It's not, Amnesty International is emphatically not saying that they should not be cooperating with the Libyan authorities at all. What we're saying is that they should be cooperating with them with a view to protecting rights, not abusing them. How would they do this? They would insist with the Libyan authorities that their system of detention, automatic detention of migrants and refugees is ended. They would insist on evacuation schemes that weren't exclusively being offered to economic migrants to voluntary return back home, but also systems that identified those with protection needs, so refugees, and offered resettlement to those refugees. At the moment, that's not really on the table. So if you're going to have a system that traps people in Libya, you need to think long and hard about the arrangements you make for those that you are trapping in Libya. One, not to be abused whilst they're there, and two, how they get out safely, and not just back to their countries of origin, but if they're refugees, to places where their protection needs will be met.
Now, John, recently the European leaders, European Union leaders met with African Union leaders and agreed in Ivory Coast that there will be voluntary repatriation, which has been a program organized by the International Organization of Migration. Is this perhaps a kind of a better solution where people are transferred to either their home countries or other nations that are willing to take them?
It's certainly part of the solution. It's a good thing that this should be offered in greater number with more support, and that the IOM is able to operate more extensively across Libya. All these things are in themselves good things and welcome things. However, it's very important that it's not in the only thing that's on the table. At the moment, the reality of the choice that people in detention in Libya face is either they remain in detention in institutions where they are routinely abused and tortured, primarily for the purposes of extorting families back home. So that's where they are now. So they can either stay in detention, be tortured, be extorted, be exploited, or go back to their countries of origin through an IOM scheme. This is perhaps attractive if you are an economic migrant chancing their lot. But if you are fleeing persecution in your home country, that is a devil's choice. Wow. Stay and be persecuted in Libya, or return and be persecuted in your country of origin. Wow. So unless the international community is also putting resettlement options for refugees on the table, it's only doing half of what's needed.
Well, John, we thank you very much for giving us your insights. That's John Dalhousen is the director of Amnesty International Europe. Thank you very much. Now, French President Emmanuel Macron is hosting leading philanthropists from around the world to encourage more climate-related investment. The climate summit comes 2 years to the day of 195 nations adopted the Paris Agreement to stave off global warming. Among world leaders at the summit are American businessmen Bill Gates and Michael Bloomberg. Macron said U.S. President Trump's rejection of the Paris Climate Accord has only helped to boost momentum for it.
The decision of President Trump just to leave the Paris Agreement was the very beginning of a new story. And I do believe that's our collective chance. It created a huge momentum. After this decision, we accelerated the ratification. we had more and more countries joining the club and ratifying the Paris Agreement. It was a sort of big shock for a lot of people saying, wow, if the very first country decides to leave the club, now it's at risk.
Well, Macron has awarded grants worth millions of dollars to bring American and other climate scientists to France. The program is meant to counter Trump's rejection of the agreement. Former U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, who was also at the summit, says Trump's rejection of the climate deal does not represent most of America.
We have 38 states that have renewable portfolio standard laws. We have 90 cities, the major cities in America, their mayors are all committed to meeting Paris. So 80% of the population of America is in those 38 states that are committed. And we're going to stay on track.
Well, observers and participants have warned that without trillions of dollars of investment in clean energy, the goal to keep global warming below 2 degrees Celsius over pre-industrial levels will remain a pipe dream. Developing nations want financial assistance to help them make the costly move to less polluting energy sources and to shore up defenses against superstorms, mega droughts, and rising sea levels. Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta is calling for unity, saying he wants to drive the nation forward. Kenyatta says he's willing and committed to engaging all Kenyans as well as the country's political leaders, including his former opponent, Raila Odinga. Kenyatta's remarks followed last month's chaotic elections, which Odinga boycotted. Kenyatta was speaking as he led the nation in celebrating 54 years of independence. Kenya's opposition National Super Alliance, NASA coalition, had planned to swear in Odinga as alternative president today. But on Sunday, NASA postponed that plan, easing political tensions and opening a window for possible talks with Kenyatta's government. Now, Odinga's coalition says any talks must have electoral justice as part of the agenda. But over the weekend, Kenyatta said any talks with anyone will not touch on the concluded elections. New York police say the man who set off a crude pipe bomb in the city's subway system on Monday had watched Islamic State propaganda on the internet. He reportedly told investigators he acted in retaliation for U.S. military aggression. The family of Akaid Ullah says they are heartbroken and deeply saddened by the suffering that attack had caused. A spokesperson for Ullah's family says they are upset over what they call the aggressive way they are being targeted by police.
But we are also outraged by the behavior of the law enforcement officials who have held children as small as 4 years old out in the cold and who pulled a teenager out of high school classes to interrogate him without a lawyer, without his parents. These are not the sorts of actions we expect from our justice system, and we have every confidence that our justice system will find the truth behind this attack. And that
Well, 27-year-old Ullah, who came to the United States from Bangladesh, wounded himself and 3 bystanders. He allegedly detonated the bomb in a tunnel connecting the Port Authority bus terminal with the Times Square subway stop. Officials believe Ullah acted alone. This was the second apparent terror attack in New York in the past 2 months. In October, an ISIS sympathizer drove a rented truck along a bicycle path in Manhattan, killing 8 people. Following the attack, the White House renewed its calls for an end to chain migration. Ramon Taylor reports from New York.
During morning rush hour in the busy underground cross-section of New York's Port Authority bus terminal in Times Square, a male suspect identified as 27-year-old Akaid Ullah, a Bangladeshi native, attempted and failed to properly detonate a homemade pipe bomb. The attacker, who law enforcement says was inspired by the so-called Islamic State, came to the U.S. in 2011 on an F-4 visa, known as a family preference immigrant visa, one that the Trump administration is attempting to curtail.
The president's policy has called for an end to chain migration, and if that had been in place, that would have prevented this individual from coming to the United States. So the president is aggressively going to continue to push forth responsible immigration reform, and ending chain migration would certainly be a part of that process.
The Embassy of Bangladesh condemned the act and declared that the suspected terrorist must be brought to justice. Outside his apartment in Brooklyn, a bomb squad and scores of media inundated an otherwise quiet, diverse residential neighborhood. Alan Butrico, a neighbor who runs a locksmith business down the street, says nothing seemed out of the ordinary.
He was a quiet neighbor. We had no issues with him. He'd walk by the store, he'd go shopping, the bagel store, the grocery store. He hung out in the park across the street. And I thought he was just a shy kid. He never really spoke to anybody.
The suspect was being treated for burns at Manhattan's Bellevue Hospital. The 3 injured bystanders suffered minor injuries, including headaches and ringing ears. Regular traffic resumed by evening. Near the site, some local residents were shaken by the incident. Others showed a calm resolve.
The fear is always present with us, those of us that live in New York. Any sound that is not normal, your body shudders, and you look around to see whether you need to get down or not.
I don't know. I'm not scared. They're on top of the game. Yeah, they are on top of the game. Because after 9/11, none of them really succeed.
Monday's attack was the second terror-related incident in New York City in less than 2 months, and the first suspected bomb to detonate in the New York subway in 23 years. Ramon Taylor, VOA News, New York.
Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Makori. Well, now coming up, the global effort to combat tropical diseases. Stay with us.
This is a country that I chose to become a citizen. I didn't have to become a citizen. I chose to become a citizen.
I feel like America gave me an opportunity to pursue my passion as an artist.
I really believe that clean eating is a way to a more successful life, or a happier life, if you want to put it that way.
One of the things that helps me wake up every morning is doing better, being better.
We grew up poor, and so I'm always focused on helping the working class be able to have a more comfortable lifestyle.
I'm passionate about doing justice every day. I oftentimes say that justice is a verb, not a noun. You know, I believe in action and moving the ball forward.
Turning to health now, tropical diseases are prevalent in or unique to tropical and subtropical regions. They are infectious and affect billions of people around the world. Now, recently, experts and advocates gathered at the 66th annual meeting of the American Society for Tropical Diseases and Hygiene. Africa 54 health correspondent Lina Madu has this report.
In 2015, malaria infected about 212 million people globally. An estimated 429,000 people died. The World Health Organization says dengue fever infects 50 to 100 million people each year. These mosquito-borne diseases thrive in the hot and humid conditions of the tropics, bringing sickness, death, and despair. This kind of tropical diseases affect more than 1 billion people worldwide. Doctors and scientists discussed progress in global efforts to find new and improved solutions. Dr. Mamadou Barre is from Mali.
This is one of the biggest meetings for tropical disease in the world. So this is an opportunity for us to show what we are doing and to meet other researchers and to have a new partnership and collaboration with other institutions.
About 4,400 participants from 100 countries attended the conference in Baltimore. The main objective was to find new tools and strategies that will reduce the worldwide burden of tropical infectious diseases. There were presentations of cutting-edge research, ongoing health threats, and latest tools for addressing diseases and outbreaks. Dr. Patricia Walker is president of the American Society of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene.
Parasites are always evolving, so we need to not rest on what we have learned in the past as scientists, that we need to develop new tests, new treatments for diseases, and so we're constantly needing to stay ahead of the tropical diseases that are evolving so quickly.
Dr. Walker says funding is crucial. Tropical diseases cost developing economies several billions of dollars each year. Malaria alone is estimated to cost Africa $12 billion every year. That includes cost of healthcare, absenteeism, and loss of investment in tourism. About 80% of the global burden of malaria is in sub-Saharan Africa. Children under 5 suffer the most, so do pregnant women. Kate Wolf is malaria team leader for the U.S. Agency for International Development's flagship maternal and child survival program.
So what we do is we help people get access to services. For example, in Kenya, we're using community health volunteers to help women access prenatal care. And last year, we were able to improve the number of women who come early for services by 50%, which means more women are getting access to life-saving malaria medicines earlier. Last year, Japaigo was instrumental in delivering malaria medicines to 1.3 million pregnant women globally.
Eva Nathanson is with Unitaze.
We have investments in new ways to prevent malaria amongst children. We are working with Malaria Consortium to prevent malaria amongst pregnant women. We are working with Japaigo. We are also working with an organization called IVCC to get better insecticides out in countries to spray houses to prevent malaria. And we are also working with a number of other partners here that are present here in Baltimore this week to curb malaria in countries where the needs are the greatest.
Not all tropical diseases are transmitted by mosquitoes. Dracunculiasis, or guinea worm disease, is contracted when people consume water from stagnant sources contaminated with guinea worm larvae. Considered a neglected tropical disease, it incapacitates people for extended periods of time. Whether they are neglected, such as guinea worm, or receive more attention like malaria, medical experts hope to make the high burden of all tropical diseases a thing of the past. Linor Mudu, VOA News, Washington.
Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. Speeding with control, Nigeria's latest car stands craze. We'll be right back.
In Italy, Amnesty International accuses European governments and Italy in particular of being complicit in the torture of tens of thousands of migrants and refugees in Libya in an attempt to reduce arrival numbers. The International Monetary Fund chief, Christine Lagarde, in Benin for a 3-day visit, says the government keeps its word on implementing promised reforms. In Sierra Leone, the government has set up alternative schools to encourage young mothers to continue their education while pregnant. In Nigeria, rising incomes and demand for natural skin and hair care products has seen many businesses spring up in the country and parts of the continent in recent years as the beauty market grows.
Welcome back to Africa 54, and here's what's trending. A Beverly Hills, California biotech company claims it's taking our bad habits and turning them into healthy ones. It's created a range of inhalable products which, instead of delivering tobacco or nicotine, release vaporized vitamins, caffeine, or melatonin. The company, Inhale Health, claims the trend is spreading beyond California. It claims pharmaceutical-grade B12, B1, B2, and B6 in liquid form are turned into a nutrient-rich vapor, which is inhaled through slim metal dispensers. The inhalers cost $20 per inhaler pen, and each pen contained 500 inhalations. Well, next up, it's dangerous and fun, and the drivers of these spinning vehicles say they are addicted to it. About 100 car enthusiasts and adrenaline junkies gathered in Lagos, Nigeria last weekend for the second edition of Raves and Runway event to witness heart-stopping car stunts where drivers speed and spin their cars. Known as drifting, the technique involves a driver driving around in circles or spinning at high speed while blowing up a lot of smoke from their cars' rear tires. And the event was organized by Dark Knight Motorsports Limited and saw 7 drifters show off their skills. Well, and finally, people who drink 3 to 4 cups of coffee a day are more likely to see health benefits than harm, experiencing lower risks of premature death and heart diseases than those who abstain. Now, researchers at Britain's University of Southampton have found that coffee consumption is linked to lower risks of diabetes, liver disease, dementia, and some cancers. 3 or 4 cups of coffee a day provide the greatest benefit, scientists say, except for women who are pregnant or who have a higher risk of suffering fractures. Coffee is one of the most commonly consumed drinks in the world, with an estimated 2 billion cups consumed daily. And that is what is trending today. Now, those apps on your phone are expected to earn their developers about $77 billion this year. Some entrepreneurs who are looking to grab a bit of that market were showing off their products in Germany this week. Viewers Kevin Enox reports.
At TechCrunch Berlin, there's an app for that, whatever that is. The Jam Easy fits on a violin and communicates with your smartphone, turning it into a portable fiddle teacher.
We are targeting the beginners who want to learn the musical instrument. We want to help them.
And this is the Gudak. Its developers want you to think about the pictures you're taking. Users can only take 24 photos at a time and then have to digitally reload. To make it even more like an old-fashioned camera, users don't get their photos for 3 days.
These days, we take too much photos, and it became not the memory, but data. It's tons of data you're making. With the Gudak, you got to be really decisive and selective, so it became a real good memory.
Good, faster. But not everything on display here is an app. There are some other pretty cool gadgets on display, like Storybot, a little electronic toy that gets your kids moving.
So, this is Storybot. Storybot is a gaming console for screen-free entertainment. It makes kids play physically and play with each other. The idea is that you have different characters that you can put on it, and each character would have a different voice, different narrative, and a different story. And with these characters, children go on journeys, on stories, on adventures.
And if you tend to misplace your phone, there is the Safe Skin, a cover for your phone that's linked to a little square alarm device. When they get too far apart, the alarm goes off and the phone beeps as well.
We also enable this really fast alarming system, the gadget called the Eye, and if the two go out of a range of about 5-6 meters, the safety range, then both start to alarm.
Just a few of the hundreds of apps and gadgets on display at this year's TechCrunch. Kevin Enox, VOA News.
Well, and that's our show for today. Now be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. And for more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show African News Tonight at 1800 UTC and in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC Monday through Friday. Thanks for watching. From all of us in Washington, have a good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. Most people enjoy listening to music. But is this expression actually about songs and tunes?
Music to my ears.
Jonathan, I cannot believe we have to work over the weekend.
Did you not hear the news? The meeting for the project got canceled. No work this weekend after all.
Awesome! That is music to